Recently, Cyberpunk 2077 has revived its public perception, with the release of Phantom Liberty and its 2.0 and 2.1 updates. But how does CD Projekt Red resuscitate one of the most disappointing games of all time and turn it into a loved game that won't be remembered in infamy?
Wake the fuck up, samurai. We have a city to burn.
Cyberpunk was first announced in 2012, with the first teaser trailers coming in 2013 at E3. It built instant hype for CD Projekt Red's upcoming project. Though Cyberpunk ended up suffering several delays, it was originally slated to be released on April 16th of 2020, eventually being delayed to December 10th of the same year. It caused fans to be slightly worried and put a damper on what was already considered a bad year. When it launched though, Cyberpunk didn't live up to people's expectations. It caused fans to be angry and some to even feel betrayed. Though Cyberpunk was launched in a broken state, with many players experiencing game-breaking glitches and numerous visual bugs.
Oh. Is this game worth it? Does that answer your question?
It was also missing features promised by CD Projekt Red, such as multiplayer, which even after 2.1 isn't in the game and likely never will be, considering they stated that they are pretty much done with the game. Vastly more customization options, immersive and dynamic AI, and more I'll throw up on the screen. It was 2020 though, and many game studios either weren't able to push out their game on time due to the global lockdown, or were forced to delay the game continuously and eventually put out an unfinished product. It also had unfair expectations. Players and fans of the Cyberpunk universe were somehow expecting an action RPG game that follows a set story to have the freedom and flexibility of the tabletop games that it's based on. Like, people were expecting to play as any person they wanted to and be able to do anything they wanted to, and they were somehow expecting to have a narrative form around that. And while I will admit that the life paths should have made more of an effect than just certain dialogue choices in the games, the game already had astounding expectations on it to begin with. It was expected to be by far the best game of all time, and when it didn't deliver, while it was already an unfinished and half-baked product, people were just giving it extra hell because they were disappointed because it didn't live up to their expectations and freedom of a set video game. Not completely taken up for Cyberpunk. The game was a disappointment. One of the only things I enjoyed of the game was the combat. Despite the majority of disappointment with the gameplay, the combat felt refreshing, unique, and diverse. The game had interesting and various ways to play when it wasn't bugging, and Cyberpunk does tell one of, if not the best single-player stories, with interesting and captivating characters. Unfortunately, many players put the game down, me included. The glaring flaws were just too prevalent and made the game a slog to play. While the combat was fun, you weren't able to enjoy it most of the time because the system would get overwhelmed and crash, or the bugs would cause game-breaking glitches where you just couldn't enjoy the combat. So while the combat was fun, you didn't get to enjoy it majority of the time due to the game not even working correctly. And even though the combat was fun, it wasn't entirely what was promised of the game to begin with. After the initial disappointment and mass exodus from their game, CD Projekt Red got to work on fixing the bugs and trying to at least make the game playable for the players that stuck around, and any newcomers. though they would have a hard time bringing back the disappointed and disillusioned players. Their main focus on these patches tended to be removing glitches, fixing bugs, fixing major gameplay issues, game stability, and improving the graphics. To players who stuck around for the year and a half most of these patches went out, they found themselves enjoying an albeit far cry from what was supposed to be hidden gem of a game. Cyberpunk always had good core elements that just needed slight tweaks. Combat, stealth, the soundtrack, and story was good. Not to mention the setting, Night City. It had interesting side missions, gigs, cyberpsycho sightings, and NCPD scanners that were scattered throughout the map that gave players things to do. The groundwork was there, Cyberpunk just needed time to make the game actually playable. There were some personal issues I had with the game, besides it being unplayable and broken, and they mostly came down to role-playing aspects. Cyberpunk only had one apartment originally in the game. You couldn't move or anything, so you were locked into this one place. There was also no wardrobe setting, and your armor was tied to your clothing, meaning you had to wear whatever the best number or stats were. And you couldn't style to your personal preference without sacrificing your defense, which was annoying because a game that was in the future setting and had cyberware and implants and all this cool stuff, your armor was based on your clothes, not your chrome. After spending over a year and a half trying to fix their game, CD Projekt Red needed a way to bring players to it. They rolled out the Edgerunners update, ahead of the Cyberpunk anime of the same name. After 1 year, 8 months, and 27 days, players started to return to Cyberpunk en masse. On September 6, 2022, patch 1.6 rolled out, and with it came content from the anime, a wardrobe system so you could finally personalize your character, new gigs, new weapons, cross progression, an arcade game, and various gameplay/bug fixes. The update was focused on quality of life upgrades and to show people one thing: Cyberpunk was back. Though it still hadn't met everyone's expectations, or lived up to its potential, it was now back in the public eye. Not as a broken game, but as a playable one, and a good one at that. And it showed on Steam. The player count rose to over 80,000 concurrent players. Since the game's player count increased, and less people that played it were disappointed with it, Cyberpunk started to become more appreciated for its core aspects that were previously mentioned. But since the game was no longer a broken mess, and CD Projekt Red improved the graphics and gameplay, Cyberpunk started to gain glory. Because of this, CD Projekt Red decided it was time to get to work. On June 11th, 2023, they announced Phantom Liberty, a story expansion to Cyberpunk 2077. After its announcement, Phantom Liberty instantly became many players' most anticipated game of 2023. Granted, it was an expansion, not a game, but still. In a year of gaming that was loaded by many accounts, with games such as Tears of the Kingdom, Baldur's Gate 3, Spider-Man 2, Jedi Survivor, Hogwarts Legacy, the Resident Evil 4 remake, the Dead Space game, the Mario game, Alan Wake 2, and many others, the year was stacked. But gamers still waited for Phantom Liberty, me included. So Cyberpunk, a game that was considered one of the most disappointing games of all time, was able to turn its image around and get people excited again. But players would have to wait and see if CD Projekt Red would let them down again, or if the hype was warranted this time. It's not often you get to see games turn their image around like this. Most times, the game's just bad. It has core elements that just can't be fixed. A game like Starfield, for example, will always be a boring game. There was nothing to fix. Games that are just boring to begin with can't be fixed. Games that are broken tend to be left alone because they were broken for a reason. These things can't be fixed. CD Projekt Red decided they didn't want to let their game down, and they didn't want to let people who played the game down, which they already did, but they put their noses to the ground and said, we gotta find out these issues and we gotta fix them, which they did. And it feels like it's not often that happens. That doesn't happen that often. Game companies usually just want to move on to the next project. They don't think it's worth their time spending money on a project that is considered a disappointment by many accounts. But it worked. They spent time into this game and they turned its image around. Ahead of Phantom Liberty, on September 21st, 2023, CD Projekt Red released Cyberpunk 2.0. 2.0 came with a multitude of changes. It wasn't just an update to fix bugs. It wasn't an update to increase fan interest. No. Cyberpunk 2.0 might as well have been a new game. It came with a reworked perk system, cyberware overhaul, clothing and armor overhaul, weapon rework, added vehicle combat, and revamped the police. Playing Cyberpunk when the 2.0 update came out felt like a completely different experience after playing it from the Edgerunners update. I had 100% of the game, and when I went back to it, it was almost unrecognizable. I felt like I had to relearn the entire way to play the game, and that's not a bad thing. It was completely different. The movement felt smoother and better. The combat, which I had already enjoyed, was way better. The vehicle combat added new challenges to the game, and the reworked police system, while not as good as a game like GTA, still added more challenges to the police previous, which I never had problems with. Then 5 days later came Phantom Liberty, a spy thriller expansion that opened up a new area to explore in Night City, Dogtown. It added new gigs, side missions, and obviously Phantom Liberty's main story. It was refreshing to see new content almost 3 years after the game released, and the content was good. Phantom Liberty added over 30 hours worth of content to Cyberpunk. Couple that with Cyberpunk 2.0, and it was almost as if it was a new game. As of Update 2.1, the latest update, CD Projekt Red seemed to be finished with Cyberpunk 2077, officially moving on to other projects, such as future Witcher games and Cyberpunk Orion. Hopefully it'll be good at launch this time.